Hello everyone, this is Ben, and today we're going to look at a Task 1 IELTS academic module essay. It's a table, as you can see, providing data on the total number of student enrollments per 2-month period. For example, total enrollments for the January to February period, and it's 3 different English language schools in a single year in the past. Now, I have one of my students' essays. We're going to talk about it. But before we do, I would strongly recommend that you pause the video on each of the slides. There are 3. Look at the band descriptors here and think about which scores you think it deserves. So I'm going to give you a chance to do that now. So this is the first slide. This is the second. This is the third and final one. And these are the band descriptors, which may be a little bit small depending on which kind of device you're using. But again, you can access this online yourself just with a quick Google search. It's the public version of the IELTS Writing Task 1 band descriptors. Available to everyone, that's what public means. The public is people, that's you and me. And I recommend that you do this because it's always interesting to see how closely your predictions match my estimations of what kinds of scores this essay would get. So we'll do the minor corrections first, and then we'll talk about the kind of bigger picture stuff. Okay, so a table doesn't describe. Describe is give information about something. Like if I describe my father, I say what he looks like. If I describe the weather, I give some detail about what the weather is like. So description is saying what something is like. We're not saying what the information is like, we're just giving information. So the table provides information about the number of pupils. Yeah, I guess it's more the numbers. And for me, pupils is school children. We could be talking about adult learners. Pupils are school children, usually when we're talking about, elementary school and middle school and high school. So it's the numbers of language students registered at 3 discrete English language schools in 2017. I would remove the word discrete, and I might kind of add that it's the figures for every 2 months. We can say bi-monthly. Interesting when you say bi-weekly, bi-monthly, or biannually. It can have 2 meanings. It can mean, in this case, twice a month or once every 2 months. Here we're talking about the numbers once every 2 months. The numbers every 2 months, as it says here, per 2-month period. The word discrete is completely redundant. Discrete means separate. I assume that this student who wrote this essay was trying to use language I've given before in corrections. It probably would have been for age groups. Like, let's imagine I've got some figures for different age ranges, like 18 to 30 years old. And then, in fact, let's say 18 to 29 years old, and then 30 to 39 years old, then 40 to 49 years old. I could say that these are discrete or separate, because technically it could be something like this. It could be 18 to 29, and then it could be 25 to 35. So there'd be 25-year-olds here and also in this one. But here we're just talking about English language schools. Of course, they're separate schools. You don't really need to mention that they're separate. You could mention that the businesses are separate enterprises rather than part of a chain or something, having the same parent company or something like that. But to be honest, we don't know that from the data. So let's just delete the word discrete. It's not really necessary. It doesn't add any information that we need. So overall, it's clear that enrolments at the Mayfair School of English increased abruptly across the year. There we go. They go up every time. Up, 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 up. Abrupt means suddenly, kind of like if it's a line graph like that, it's quite sudden. We're not talking about that. Abruptly is the wrong word. Continually means again and again. So here, once, again, continually went up, repeatedly. Continually across the year, while despite having the highest number of students at the start of the year, BCEA student numbers fell over the 12 months. And again, that's true. Initially, the highest, higher even than NZCL, which had, the highest overall numbers, but highest at the beginning. But then from here, numbers are dropping off quite significantly. And at the end of the year, they're the lowest. It's important that we don't make any conclusions based on that. It could be something to do with the curriculums at the different schools. It could be where the schools are located and when foreign students are free, like if it's the university holidays. We don't do things like assume the business is failing. It's not our job to do that. We don't speculate about the reasons. We just discuss the data, basically, and the trends and that kind of thing. So that's fine. Fell over the 12 months quite clearly. I mean, not continually fell, because they actually increased at first. But okay, we're talking about overall, so I'll allow that. Good introduction. Some very strong language, I think, with the grammar, for example. So if we look at the table more closely, it can be observed that, it can be seen that MSc started the year with only 135 students, which I guess was the lowest figure or number among the three schools that year. However, student numbers increased steadily across the year. Good language. I could argue that we shouldn't repeat the same language across the year, finishing with a high of 742 learners in the November to December period. Language learners being a better word, I feel, than pupils here. Similarly, student numbers at the NZCL also increased from January to August, starting at 314 students in the January to February period and rising to a high of 683 students in the July to August period. And again, maybe I could find a way to avoid repeating the word period, but it's not a huge problem because there's so much good language there in general. However, after August, student enrollments dropped continuously, falling to 496 enrollments at the end of the year. I would delete continuously, because continuously is kind of like steady decrease. But it's not a line graph where we can really see that it's kind of not stopping at all. It's more like data for 2-month periods. It would be better kind of drawn as a bar chart, I think, than a line graph. Just giving the 2 months. Because we don't know how the enrollment works, and it could be that enrollments don't have to be at the start of the 2-month period. They could be allowed at any time, and continuously would suggest that they're lower in February than they are in January. And I don't think we really know that. Hopefully my thinking makes sense there. So I'm just going to get rid of that word. Falling to 496 enrollments at the end of the year. Everything else there's pretty good. In contrast, BCA had the most student enrollments at the start of the year, with 398 in January and February. Student enrollments increased to 491 over the next period. Again, not really over, for similar reasons to continuously. When you say over, you're talking about throughout the whole period. But here we're just talking more about 2-month blocks. So for the next period, but then the numbers drop sharply to only 212 enrollments in July and August. So in contrast, it works quite well here, I feel, because in the previous paragraph, we're talking about schools which start low, and then there's kind of continual increases in the numbers to end with the very high figures, basically like this. This school also increased, rising to a high. And here we're talking about one which conversely started high, kind of having the highest point in the second session, the second 2-month period, but then dropped sharply to end with relatively low numbers. So it is the opposite, so that works quite well. So the student who wrote this essay has clearly thought about the way to organize the writing, and to kind of structure it in a way that they can talk about the whole thing in a relatively small number of words in a concise way. Student numbers picked up slightly in the next period, climbing back to 267 before numbers dropped once again to only 209 enrollments at the year's end. So again, very good. I guess we don't really have to repeat the word numbers, just climbing before dropping once again. But ing. But I'm just nitpicking here, it's a very minor detail. When we use before, we can use a clause like this, subject and verb, or we can use before ing, so we can say before dropping once again. And that just would avoid the repetition of the word numbers, but it is a very minor point. Picked up, phrasal verbs are usually slightly informal, but when you're talking about this kind of language for data, picked up is okay. You're talking about numbers dropping and then starting to recover, go up again. So that's absolutely fine. So what would I give this? Very good score. Overall 8 with 8 in everything. So in this situation, it might be more helpful to think about why I wouldn't give it 9. I think everything's done really well, but I possibly would not say that it's a fully developed response. because for example, it says overall it's clear that enrolments at the Mayfair School of English increased continually across the year, while despite having the highest number of students at the start of the year, best communication English students number fell over the 12 months. Well, for one thing, it's only talking about 2 of the 3 schools, for example, even though what it says is true. For another thing, it doesn't really talk about how NZCL has the highest total number of enrolments over the year, which would be something that might be useful to talk about when we're talking about the overall situation, the wider view. So rather than talking about the changes in the numbers, how they're largest in the middle of the year, which again isn't really spoken about, how if it were a line graph, it would kind of go like that and be a peak in the middle. But the bigger picture is this has the highest number of students, even if it's not continually the highest in each individual 2-month period. Another thing is it is the number of student enrollments per 2-month periods, but that is something that is actually not mentioned in the student's answer, which is why I added something to make clear that we're talking about the numbers every 2 months. So it's very good, but I couldn't say it's perfect. I couldn't say it's 9, fully developed in every way. Coherence and cohesion, well, to get 9, it has to be perfectly native-like. Basically, using cohesion in such a way that attracts no attention. I can't say that's true. Like here, for example, we don't have the lowest number, or the lowest figure, like the lowest what. If the word figure or number appeared earlier in the sentence, we could say the lowest, the lowest one. But it doesn't, and we can't. And here, not look at the table, but looking at the table more closely. Just a couple of examples to show you why it's getting that 8 and not the 9. The 9, which, would be a really excellent native-like essay by someone who understands what academic writing requires. Lexical resource and grammar. Again, 8, not 9, so to get a 9, you're allowed rare minor errors occurring only as slips. I can genuinely say I wouldn't have rare minor errors as slips. I do when I'm speaking, but writing, because I can check it. Writing is the thing I've always been best at. There would be nothing. But for most people, for mere mortals, mere humans, there might be occasional slips. I'll give you an example. So, what would be a good example? Instead of enrollments, you could say admissions or registrations. And they might be good synonyms. But if I said something which wasn't perfectly true, like new students, maybe that would be an example of something that wouldn't really be a big deal, because it could be some of the same students enrolling. It's a private English language school, so it could be some of the same students, so some of them might not really be new students. I mean, that's not the best example. I'll think of a better example for you. So, a a slip for a native speaker might be not understanding the difference between continuously and continually. And I do, because I'm sad enough to really care about things like this and the differences between these kinds of words constantly, continuously, continually. But even a lot of native speakers wouldn't immediately understand the difference. And if they were writing quickly, they could potentially choose the wrong one and still get a 9, because that would be a native-like mistake to make. But this is not that kind of essay with those kinds of mistakes, to be honest. I don't think any native speaker really would use describes incorrectly in that way. Pupils, no, I think native speakers in countries like the UK, where we use the word pupils, I don't think they would use it there, to be honest. The words abruptly, where was that? It seems like the student just really, really studied very hard and learned all these nice words and just really wanted to use them to show off, but ended up using them a little bit incorrectly. It could be a great word for another task 1 essay, but it's not the right word for this one. So it's not rare minor errors that occur only as slips. I hope you understand what it means by slips. A slip is when your brain just stops working for a moment, even though it normally works okay. It just stops for a few seconds, because you're a human, not a machine. And grammatical range and accuracy, again, it's not really rare minor errors that occur only as slips. It has a lot of range and flexibility, but I wouldn't say full flexibility and accuracy. Because of a couple of things that I've already spoken about, like here. And I think there are 1 or 2 other things. Usually when you're giving a specific figure, for example, finishing at, ending at, is usually a bit better than with. Again, there was a couple of small issues with things like prepositions. Where was it? Yeah, using over maybe in a way that's not perfectly correct. I'm being a bit mean there, because the grammar is really, really good for this. But I guess I thought that if it was a kind of 8+ and I possibly gave it a 9, it would not affect the overall score. So I'm not really too concerned about that. My gut feeling, it was a very good 8, but maybe not quite enough to be a 9. Again, very small things like even punctuation. Like I would add a comma here to make it slightly better because of the way you say it. So overall, it's clear that enrolments at the Mayfair School of English increased continually across the year, while, despite having the highest number of students at the start of the year, Best Communication English Academy student numbers fell over the 12 months. So, excellent grammar. 8 is an excellent score, but I'm going to be a bit mean. I mean, 9 is the best of the best, and it's nearly 9, but it's not 9. That's my personal opinion. So, thank you for watching or listening as always, and I hope you will feel free to leave comments for this video, giving feedback. things that could be explained more clearly, things you would like to see, any questions you have, any comments about whether you disagree with anything I've said or which parts you strongly agree with. And that's all from me anyway, so thank you very much. Goodbye.